Before we dive into the story, let's take a moment to introduce Ziya, one of the most legendary figures in Chinese mythology. Born in extraordinary circumstances, Ziya was no ordinary child. He emerged from the womb after 3 years, already gifted with supernatural abilities. Trained by the immortal Taiyi Zhenren, he wielded powerful weapons such as the wind-fire wields, the cosmic ring, and the fire-tipped spear. Ziya's story is one of defiance and destiny. As a young warrior, he slayed the son of the Dragon King, igniting a conflict between the heavens and the mortal realm. To protect his family, he sacrificed himself but was later resurrected with a new lotus body, stronger than before. From there, he carved his own path, battling demons, challenging fate, and ultimately playing a crucial role in the Great War against the Shang Dynasty. Ziya represents rebellion, courage, and the fight for self-determination. His legend has endured for centuries, inspiring countless adaptations in literature, film, and animation. Now, let's begin our journey into the world of Ziya. Chapter 1, The Prophecy of Chentang Pass. The kingdom was crumbling under the weight of tyranny. The Shang Dynasty, once mighty and prosperous, had fallen into corruption under the rule of its cruel emperor. The people groaned under heavy taxes, their voices drowned out by the revelry of the palace. Bandits roamed the countryside, warlords vied for power, and famine spread like wildfire. The heavens watched in silence, but destiny was already at work, weaving a tale of rebellion and divine retribution. And at the heart of it all was a small fortress at the edge of the empire, Chentang Pass. Within this stronghold resided General Li Jing, a warrior of great renown, whose duty was to guard the frontier. His wife, Lady Yin, was known for her grace and wisdom, but despite their prestige, one thing eluded them: a child. For years, they prayed at temples and made offerings to the gods, yet the heavens remained unmoved. But then, one fateful day, Lady Yin discovered she was with child. Joy swept through their household, and the news spread across Chentang Pass. Yet, the joy was short-lived, for her pregnancy was anything but ordinary. Months turned to years, and Lady Yin remained with child. For 3 years and 6 months, her belly swelled unnaturally, yet the child did not come. Physicians and sages were summoned, each offering different explanations. Some declared it a blessing from the gods, a sign that a great warrior was to be born. Others whispered of darker omens, fearing the child was cursed, a harbinger of disaster. The people of Chentang Pass grew uneasy, watching Lady Yin's plight with a mixture of awe and dread. Then, on a storm-lashed night, destiny finally unfolded. Dark clouds gathered above Chentang Pass, rolling in like an advancing army. Thunderclaps shook the earth, and fierce winds howled through the fortress. Rain lashed against the rooftops as lightning split the heavens, illuminating the sky with eerie brilliance. Within the fortress, Lady Yin clutched her swollen belly, her cries of agony rising above the storm. Servants rushed to her side, but none could quell the unnatural force surrounding her. The walls trembled as if the gods themselves were waging battle. Then, as the storm reached its peak, something astonishing occurred. Instead of a newborn's cry, a deafening crack filled the chamber. A glowing orb of flesh emerged from Lady Yin, pulsating with energy. The midwives gasped and recoiled in horror. The orb was unlike anything they had ever seen, its surface shimmering like molten gold, crackling with arcs of lightning. The air grew heavy with a strange, divine power. General Li Jing arrived, sword in hand, his face dark with suspicion. He had fought many battles and seen many wonders, but this defied all reason. His eyes narrowed as he gazed upon the glowing sphere. This is no child," he declared, his voice laced with dread. "This is sorcery, a demon in disguise." He raised his sword, ready to strike down the unnatural being before him, but before he could bring the blade down, the orb split open with an explosive burst of light. The force sent shockwaves through the chamber, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. When the brilliance faded, a child stood before them, not a wailing infant, but a fully formed boy. He was no ordinary child. His body was lean, his limbs strong, he stood unshaken, his youthful face alight with mischief. His eyes burned like embers, reflecting both innocence and untamed power. Fiery ribbons of energy swirled around him, dissipating into the air like wisps of smoke. He turned to face his stunned parents, a grin forming on his lips. Then, with a voice filled with youthful confidence, he declared, "I am Ziya." Chapter 2, A Child Unlike Any Other. Despite his miraculous birth, Ziya's arrival was met with fear and suspicion. The people of Chentang Pass whispered among themselves, wary of the strange child who had emerged from an orb. Though Lady Yin adored her son, General Li Jing remained unconvinced, fearing that this was a divine punishment rather than a blessing. Determined to uncover the truth, he summoned the great Taoist master, Taiyi Zhenren, to examine the child. Taiyi Zhenren, an immortal sage known for his wisdom, arrived at the fortress riding upon a mystical crane, with hair long, flowing beard and robes adorned with celestial patterns. He exuded an aura of great power. As he gazed upon Ziya, he saw not a demon, but a force of destiny itself. He placed his hand on the boy's forehead and closed his eyes. Moments later, he smiled. "This child is no demon," Taiyi Zhenren proclaimed. "He is born of the essence of the heavens and the earth, destined for greatness. But he must be trained, for his power is wild and untamed." At that moment, Ziya, who had been curiously observing the sage, suddenly leapt into the air. With effortless grace, he spun in the air and landed lightly on his feet. To everyone's astonishment, fiery rings of energy coiled around his ankles, lifting him momentarily off the ground before vanishing. Taiyi Zhenren nodded knowingly. His strength is immense, but uncontrolled. He must be guided, or his power will bring destruction. And so, Ziya's training began under the immortal sage, day and night. He practiced martial arts, learned spells, and discovered the secrets of his divine origins. His body was light as a feather, his speed unmatched, and his strength growing with each passing day. However, with his newfound abilities came an insatiable curiosity, and an irrepressible sense of mischief. One day, while exploring the shores beyond Chentang Pass, Ziya encountered a group of villagers huddled in fear. When he approached, they recoiled in terror. The Dragon King's minions. They cried, "They have come again to demand sacrifices." Intrigued, Ziya pressed for details. The villagers spoke of the East Sea's Dragon King, a mighty and fearsome deity who ruled the waters. His minions would often come to collect tributes, gold, food, and sometimes, even human lives. Ziya clenched his fists, his fiery spirit igniting. "I won't let them harm you," he declared. That was the day the heavens and the seas would collide, as Ziya prepared to face the wrath of the Dragon King. Chapter 3, The Wrath of the Dragon King. Ziya did not hesitate. As the villagers trembled, he strode toward the shore, his eyes burning with determination. He could see movement in the waves, the telltale sign of approaching danger. Moments later, 3 armored figures emerged from the sea, their scaled bodies glistening under the sun. These were the Dragon King's emissaries, cruel enforcers of his will. "The tribute is due," one of them hissed, his forked tongue flickering. "Where is the offering?" Ziya stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "There will be no offering, not today, not ever," the minions sneered. "Foolish child, do you dare defy the will of the Dragon King?" Ziya grinned. "I don't just dare, I insist." With that, he launched himself into battle. The first strike was his. With blinding speed, he darted forward, his fist crashing into the closest minion's chest. A shockwave rippled outward, sending the creature flying back into the ocean. The other 2 roared in fury, drawing jagged tridents. But Ziya only laughed, his rings igniting in flames as he prepared to face them head-on. Chapter 3, A Battle of Gods and Mortals. Ziya's confrontation with the Dragon King's forces had begun. The once calm waters of the Eastern Sea churned violently, sending massive waves crashing against the shores of Chentang Pass. The villagers watched in terror as the sky darkened, an eerie glow emanating from the depths of the ocean. A storm was brewing, and at its heart stood Ziya, his spear gleaming under the shifting skies, a dire warning. Days before the attack, an old fisherman had stumbled into Chentang Pass, breathless and drenched. He spoke of great serpents emerging from the depths, their eyes burning with vengeance. The Dragon King, enraged by the disturbance in his realm, had sent his minions to exact retribution. Li Jing dismissed the old man's words at first, believing them to be the ramblings of a delusional sailor. But Ziya felt a strange pull, an instinct that told him the warning was real. Taiyi Zhenren, his master, confirmed his suspicions. The Dragon King of the Eastern Sea is a powerful deity, he said gravely. His pride is great, and his wrath even greater. You have unknowingly provoked him, Ziya. He will not forgive easily. The arrival of the Dragon Clan. The attack came at dusk. The waters receded unnaturally, revealing the seabed as if the ocean itself had been drained. A chilling silence fell upon Chentang Pass before the waves roared back with terrifying force. Rising from the depths were armored figures, their scales glistening like polished jade. At their forefront stood Ao Bing, the Dragon King's son. You have insulted my father, Ao Bing declared, his voice carrying across the battlefield. For that, your life is forfeit. Ziya stepped forward, his hands tightening around his spear. If your father seeks vengeance, he can come himself, he shot back. I fear no dragon. Ao Bing's eyes burned with fury. With a wave of his hand, his soldiers surged forward, their weapons gleaming under the crimson sky. The battle had begun, a battle of gods and mortals. Ziya fought with the speed of a tempest, his body moving like the wind. He darted between enemies, his spear flashing with divine energy. Each strike sent ripples through the battlefield. His power undeniable. The dragon warriors were strong, but Ziya was relentless. He struck with precision, evading their counterattacks with a dancer's grace. Ao Bing, however, was no mere soldier. He wielded the ocean's fury, summoning torrents of water to engulf Ziya. The young warrior leapt high, dodging a wave that could have crushed a mountain. In midair, he spun his spear, channeling his inner power. With a single strike, he split the water apart, sending it cascading back into the sea. The wrath of the Dragon King. The heavens trembled as a powerful force stirred beneath the waves. A massive form began to rise from the ocean, its serpentine body stretching across the horizon. The Dragon King himself had arrived. His golden eyes glowed with rage, his scales glistening like molten metal under the moonlight. The sight alone was enough to send shivers down the spines of the mortals watching from the shore. You dare lay hands on my son? The Dragon King's voice rumbled like thunder, shaking the very air. You will pay for your arrogance, Ziya. The ocean surged as he raised a clawed hand, summoning a typhoon with a mere gesture. Waves taller than mountains rushed toward the land, threatening to engulf everything in their path. Ziya, undeterred, twirled his spear and leapt forward, charging straight at the colossal deity. The battle that followed was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Ziya danced across the water's surface, dodging the Dragon King's attacks with impossible agility. He struck with divine precision, his spear finding gaps between the dragon's massive scales. But for every blow Ziya landed, the Dragon King responded with unrelenting fury, summoning torrents of lightning and whirlpools to ensnare the young warrior. The villagers could only watch in awe and terror as their protector waged war against a god, the sacrifice. Despite his power, Ziya began to falter. The Dragon King's strength was immense, and even with all his might, Ziya knew he could not hold out forever. He glanced back at Chentang Pass, at the people he had sworn to protect. A realization dawned upon him: if he continued this battle, the land itself would suffer. He had to end it. Summoning the last reserves of his divine energy, Ziya made a decision that would change his fate forever. He channeled all of his life force into his spear, his body glowing with radiant energy. With a mighty cry, he hurled the weapon forward, piercing the Dragon King's chest. The impact sent shockwaves through the heavens, shaking the very fabric of reality. The Dragon King roared in agony, his colossal form convulsing. The ocean trembled as he writhed in pain, the storm clouds above dissipating, and then, with a final bellow, the mighty deity collapsed into the sea, his form vanishing beneath the waves. But Nisa, too, fell. His body, now drained of energy, began to fade. His father, Li Jing, rushed forward, catching his son as he collapsed. The villagers cried out in despair, their savior slipping away before their eyes. Taiyi Zhenren appeared, his expression grave. Nisa's soul is strong, he murmured. But his body is lost. With a heavy heart, the master made his decision. Rebirth and destiny. Taiyi Zhenren took Nisa's remains and, through ancient magic, began crafting a new body for him. Days passed as the heavens themselves watched over the process. When the ritual was complete, Nisa was reborn, not as a mortal, but as a celestial warrior, bound to his divine destiny. The people of Chentang Pass would forever remember the battle that shook the heavens and the young hero who defied gods to protect them. But Nisa's journey was far from over. Chapter 4. The Path of the Celestial Warrior. Nisa's exile began on a somber note. Cast away from his family and mortal home, he wandered the barren mountains with nothing but his spear and the wind-fire wheels beneath his feet. The weight of his actions pressed down on him like an iron chain. He had slain Ao Bing, the Dragon King's son, and in doing so, provoked the wrath of the celestial and aquatic realms alike. The trials of the exiled warrior. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The mountains were harsh, their icy peaks and endless valleys offering no comfort. He survived on whatever he could hunt, the bitter roots of wild plants, and the occasional freshwater stream hidden deep within the rock crevices. The solitude was unbearable, yet Nisa pushed forward, searching for a sign, a purpose. His only solace was in battle. Each beast that threatened his path fell to his spear, each trial he faced only strengthening his resolve. One evening, as he scaled the cliffs of the northern pass, he encountered a monstrous serpent coiled around an ancient tree. Its scales shimmered like polished steel, and its golden eyes glowed with malevolence. When it lunged, Nisa reacted on instinct, twisting his body mid-air, dodging the attack with unnatural agility. He countered, his spear flashing like lightning, striking the beast's underbelly. The battle lasted for hours, a dance of death under the blood-red sunset. In the end, Nisa emerged victorious, his body battered, his spirit tested. He took the serpent's pearl, a jewel infused with celestial energy, unknowingly sealing his fate as a warrior destined to challenge the heavens. A fateful encounter. Then, one night, under the silver glow of the full moon, he encountered a figure standing atop a floating lotus, an old man with a long white beard, dressed in robes that shimmered like the stars. His presence was both calming and powerful, radiating divine energy. Nisa, the sage, spoke, his voice carrying wisdom beyond mortal comprehension. You walk a path of destruction, but your fate is not yet sealed. Will you train under me and learn the ways of the celestial warrior? Nisa hesitated, his pride warring with the desperation in his heart. He had always been reckless, but now, he had no home, no allies. With a deep bow, he accepted the offer. Taiyi Zhenren, one of the greatest sages of the immortal realm, led Nisa to his hidden sanctuary, an ethereal temple floating above the clouds, accessible only by those worthy of divine power. Training under the sage. For years, Nisa trained under Taiyi Zhenren in the celestial realm, learning the sacred arts of combat, energy manipulation, and divine weaponry. He practiced meditation atop waterfalls, controlling his Kai until his very breath could summon winds strong enough to move mountains. He faced spirits, demons, and celestial trials designed to test his strength, both physical and mental. One trial involved the Golden Guardian, a towering colossus formed of enchanted jade. Nisa had to defeat it without using his spear. The battle was grueling, his strikes barely made a dent, and each blow from the Guardian sent him crashing through the temple walls. He adapted, using his agility and cunning to dismantle the creature piece by piece until it crumbled into dust. Another trial forced him to confront his own darkness. He was trapped within a mirror realm where his greatest fears and regrets came to life. He saw visions of his mother weeping, his father's anger, and Ao Bing's lifeless eyes staring back at him. But rather than succumbing to guilt, he accepted his past, vowing to forge his own destiny. Only then did the illusion shatter, and Taiyi Zhenren nodded approvingly. The reforging of the spear. His final test was to reforge his weapon. Under the guidance of celestial blacksmiths, he merged his original spear with the serpent's pearl he had taken, creating a divine weapon unlike any other. Its shaft pulsed with the energy of the stars, its blade sharp enough to cut through time itself. It was no longer just a weapon, it was an extension of his soul. Whispers of war. But even as he trained, whispers of war reached his ears. The celestial realm was stirring. The dragon kings, enraged by their loss, demanded vengeance. And the Jade Emperor, ruler of all heavens, debated whether Nisa was an asset or a threat. One evening, as Nisa sat upon the temple's highest peak, gazing at the vast expanse of the heavens, Taiyi Zhenren approached him. "You are strong, Nisa," the sage said, "stronger than I ever anticipated. But strength alone will not shape your destiny. The heavens do not forget, and soon, you will be forced to make a choice. Power is a burden few can bear." Nisa clenched his fists, staring at the celestial cities in the distance. He knew his time in training was coming to an end. He could feel the pull of destiny guiding him back to the mortal world. And so, with newfound strength, wisdom, and clarity, Nisa prepared to return to the land he once called home. But he knew, his greatest battles were yet to come. Chapter 5, The Gathering Storm. The return to the mortal realm. After years of training in the celestial realm, Nisa finally stood at the threshold of the mortal world. The air was different, thick with the scent of earth and the whisper of lives continuing without him. His feet touched solid ground at the outskirts of Chentang Pass, his childhood home, but something was wrong. Gone were the lively streets he once knew, fear clung to the air like an unshakable mist, and the people walked with their heads bowed, their eyes hollow. He stepped forward, his windfire wheels gently humming beneath his feet. A child, no older than 5, stared at him with wide eyes before being yanked away by his mother. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "It's him, Nisa, the cursed child returns." Nisa clenched his fists. His name, once spoken with admiration, was now a whisper of dread, a city in chains. He learned from an old beggar that his father, General Li Jing, had become even stricter, ruling Chentang Pass with an iron fist to avoid the wrath of the celestial realm. The people suffered under his rule, taxed and controlled, as he sought to atone for the sins of his son. More than that, the Dragon Kings had not forgotten their grievance. They had imposed tributes upon the village, demanding offerings of wealth and young children to appease their wrath. Nisa's blood boiled. He had trained all these years, not for vengeance, but to set things right. He would not stand by and watch innocent lives be sacrificed. They're warriors of the pass. But he would not fight alone. In the ruins of a burned-down tavern, he encountered an old friend, Lu Zheng, a former warrior of the imperial army, once a man of honor. He had been cast aside for questioning the corruption of the Shang Dynasty. He recognized Nisa immediately and, after a long conversation over ice wine, swore his loyalty. "I don't fight for kings anymore," Lu Zheng said, gripping his spear, "but I will fight for justice." Nisa also met Xuanhuan, a wandering sorceress who wielded water magic. Her origins shrouded in mystery. She had been searching for the one who had slain Ao Bing, not for revenge, but for answers. The Dragon King's son had been her childhood friend, and she wished to know the truth behind his death. "If your heart is just," she told Nisa, "then I will aid you in your battle." With allies at his side, Nisa knew they could stand against the oppression that had taken hold of Chentang Pass. The first battle. That night, under the full moon, they struck. A procession of guards escorted chained villagers toward the riverbank, where emissaries of the Dragon Kings awaited their sacrifices. Niza and his companions descended like a storm. Flames erupted as Niza's spear slashed through the chains, freeing the captives. Zheng's blade danced through the guards, while Xuanhuan conjured barriers of water, turning the enemy's strength against them. Then came the emissary, a hulking serpent demon draped in imperial silks, his golden eyes locked onto Niza, his forked tongue flicking out. "You dare defy the will of the Dragon Kings?" Niza twirled his spear, fire crackling around him. "I dare to end their tyranny." The battle was ferocious. The serpent demon's body coiled like a moving fortress, its scales nearly impenetrable. Xuanhuan's water attacks barely scratched its hide, and even Niza's flames struggled against its speed. But Zheng saw an opening, a weak spot at the base of the creature's neck. With a well-placed strike, he created an opening. Niza didn't hesitate. He plunged his spear into the exposed flesh, and the demon howled as its body crumbled into ash. The villagers stood in stunned silence. The first victory had been won. The war begins. Word of Niza's return spread like wildfire. Some hailed him as a savior, while others feared divine retribution. The Dragon Kings would not let this humiliation go unanswered. More enemies would come, stronger and more ruthless. As Niza stood at the temple ruins overlooking the city, he knew the war had only just begun. But this time, he would not run. He would face the storm head-on. Chapter 6: The Return to Chentang Pass. Niza rode the winds like a tempest reborn, his fiery wheels churning the skies as he descended toward Chentang Pass. His return was not one of celebration but of urgency. Below him, the land trembled beneath the weight of impending doom. The once thriving city was under siege, its walls battered by monstrous sea creatures that spewed forth from the storm-ridden rivers. The air was thick with the acrid scent of brine and the cries of terrified villagers seeking shelter from the onslaught. The Dragon Kings, still seething with vengeance from their past defeat at Niza's hands, had unleashed their fury upon his homeland. Towering waves crashed against the harbor, flooding streets and toppling homes. The sky was swallowed by churning storm clouds, lightning arcing in erratic fury as if heaven itself was furious. Niza's eyes blazed with determination as he touched down upon the familiar soil. He had expected many things upon his return, but the sight before him sent a sharp pang through his heart. His father, General Li Jing, stood at the city's ramparts, his once imposing figure worn by time and grief. The sight of him was a cruel reminder of their severed bond, the years of resentment that had hardened into silence. When their eyes met, there was no embrace, no words of welcome, only a bitter stillness that spoke of unhealed wounds. "Why have you returned?" Li Jing's voice carried no warmth, only the weariness of a man who had long given up on his son. Niza's grip tightened around his spear. He could see the pain in his father's gaze, but there was no time for reconciliation. "To protect what is mine," Niza answered, his voice steady despite the storm raging in his heart. A monstrous bellow split the sky. From the depths of the river, a titanic figure rose, one of the Dragon King's generals, a serpentine beast with scales as dark as the abyss and eyes burning with malice. It reared its massive head, its maw opening to unleash a torrent of water that threatened to consume the city whole. Niza leapt forward, spinning his fire-tipped spear in a blazing arc. The flames roared to life, defying the torrents as he charged headlong into battle. The moment his feet left the ground, the air itself seemed to tremble, charged with the fury of an avenger long denied his retribution. The battle that followed would be spoken of for generations. Niza moved like a streak of divine fire, his spear cutting through the monstrous horde with unrelenting precision. Each strike ignited the air, sending sea demons shrieking into the depths. He was no longer just a warrior, he was a tempest incarnate, the wrath of heaven bound in mortal form. Yet the Dragon Kings had not come unprepared. The creatures fought with unholy fervor, their forms twisting and merging, their scales hard as celestial iron. The rivers themselves turned against Niza, rising like living serpents to coil around him, seeking to drown him in their cold embrace. But he was not the same boy who had once defied the gods. With a surge of divine energy, ZHA shattered his watery prison, his rage erupting in a fiery explosion that parted the storm clouds above. The people of Chentang Pass, who had once feared him as a cursed child, now watched in awe. Their protector had returned, not as a harbinger of doom, but as their savior. Through the carnage, ZHA fought his way toward the heart of the enemy's forces, where the Dragon King's general awaited him. Their battle shook the very earth, spear clashing against talons, fire against tide. The serpent lashed out, its coils seeking to crush ZHA within its suffocating grasp, but he danced between its attacks, his movements like flickering flames in the wind. With a final, thunderous strike, ZHA drove his spear through the creature's skull. The beast let out a deafening wail before collapsing into the waters, its massive form dissolving into the depths. A moment of silence followed, the storm pausing as if in mourning for its fallen champion, and then, with a howl of defeat, the remaining sea creatures retreated, their master's death signaling the end of the assault. The rivers calmed, the sky began to clear, and Chentang Pass stood victorious, yet even in triumph, ZHA felt no peace. He turned once more to his father, expecting, hoping, perhaps foolishly, for some sign of acknowledgement. But Li Jing's face was unreadable, his eyes reflecting neither pride nor relief. "You are strong," was all he said, "stronger than I ever imagined." ZHA felt the weight of the words, but they were not the ones he had longed for. He had fought for his home, for his people, but he realized now that his battle was far from over, for as the storm clouds receded, another force watched from above. The heavens had taken notice. Chapter 7, The Wrath of the Jade Emperor. From the celestial heights of the Jade Palace, a decree was issued. ZHA's defiance could no longer be ignored. The heavens had watched him rise in power, had seen his refusal to submit to their will, and now the Jade Emperor's patience had run dry. He would not allow a mortal-born warrior to challenge divine authority. A force was assembled, one led by Erlangshan, the celestial general and one of the most formidable warriors of heaven. With his third eye ablaze and his divine spear in hand, Erlangshan descended to the mortal realm. His mission clear: ZHA was to be captured and brought before the heavenly court to face judgment. The sky darkened as the celestial army emerged from the heavens, their golden armor gleaming even in the storm's shadow. The people of Chentang Pass trembled anew, their newfound hope threatened by an even greater power. ZHA, still weary from battle, stood before the city gates, his gaze unwavering. "I will not kneel." The words were not shouted, nor were they spoken with rage. They were a simple declaration, one that carried the weight of unyielding resolve. Then, with a clash of thunder, the battle began. The heavens roared as divine warriors descended in a radiant display of celestial might. Golden arrows rained from the sky, each one carrying the force of heaven's wrath. ZHA spun his fire-tipped spear, deflecting them in streaks of flame. The ground beneath him cracked with each impact, but he stood firm, his fiery wheels propelling him forward in a blur of motion. Erlangshan watched from above, his expression unreadable. With a flick of his wrist, he summoned his divine hound, howling celestial, a beast of shimmering silver fur and eyes that burned like molten gold. The hound leapt toward ZHA with supernatural speed, fangs bared, but ZHA twisted midair, striking with precision. The beast yelped but landed gracefully, circling him with renewed caution. Then, Erlangshan himself entered the fray, spear met spear in a clash that shook the heavens. Every strike sent ripples through the air, each parry splitting the sky. The warriors fought with the fury of gods, their movements blurring as they exchanged blows faster than mortal eyes could follow. Their battle wove through the sky, over the fields, and into the heart of Chentang Pass itself. Villagers watched in awe and terror as the heavens and earth clashed in divine fury. ZHA gritted his teeth. This was no ordinary battle, this was a test, a trial imposed by the heavens themselves. But he had made his choice long ago. He would not yield. Suddenly, another presence made itself known. From the depths of the mountains, a new figure approached. a lone warrior, clad in robes of midnight blue, stepped forward. His long silver hair cascaded over his back, and in his hand, he held a crescent moon blade that shimmered with ethereal light. "Enough," the man said, his voice like the whisper of wind through bamboo. Erlangchen and Nisa both halted their battle, turning toward the stranger. Recognition flickered in Erlangchen's third eye. "Taiyi Zhenren," Erlangchen murmured, "you should not interfere." Taiyi Zhenren, Nisa's former master and teacher, gazed upon his student with a calm but resolute expression. "Nisa's not your enemy," he stated firmly. "You fight because you have been ordered to, but do you know the truth of this conflict?" Erlangchen's grip on his spear tightened. "Nisa has defied the heavens. He must face judgment." Taiyi Zhenren sighed. "And yet, he has done what the heavens themselves have failed to do, protect the innocent." For a moment, a heavy silence fell upon the battlefield. The celestial soldiers hesitated, uncertain. Nisa, breathing heavily, stared at his master, his heart warring between relief and defiance. Before anyone could speak further, a powerful presence made itself known. The sky split open, and from the heavens descended a golden chariot, pulled by celestial phoenixes wreathed in divine fire. A being of unimaginable radiance sat upon the chariot, his robes woven with the very threads of fate itself. His gaze alone sent waves of divine energy rippling across the battlefield. The Jade Emperor had arrived. Every warrior, mortal and divine, fell to their knees in reverence. Even Erlangchen bowed his head. Only Nisa remained standing, his defiance unwavering. "You dare remain unbowed before me?" The Jade Emperor's voice rumbled like the very fabric of existence unraveling. Nisa met the Emperor's gaze, his own fiery spirit refusing to yield. "I have done nothing wrong," he declared. "I have fought to protect the people, to uphold justice. If that is a crime, then judgment be damned." Gasps of horror rippled through the celestial army. To speak so boldly before the Emperor was unthinkable. The Jade Emperor's eyes narrowed, and a terrible pressure filled the air, pushing against Nisa's very soul. Yet, he did not falter. Taiyi Zhenren stepped forward. "Great Jade Emperor, if I may speak." The Emperor lifted a hand, silencing him. "Nisa," he said, "your strength is undeniable, your spirit is unbreakable, but your defiance cannot go unanswered." He raised his hand, and the heavens trembled. A pillar of divine lightning surged forth, hurtling toward Nisa with the wrath of the cosmos itself. Time seemed to slow. Nisa could see the lightning descending, feel its immeasurable power bearing down upon him. He gripped his spear tightly, determination flashing in his eyes. He would not run, he would not hide, he would stand against the heavens themselves. And then, the world exploded in light. Chapter 8, The Fall of the Immortals. The celestial war began not with a single clash of weapons, but with the whisper of rebellion that spread like wildfire through the heavens. Discontent had festered for centuries beneath the rule of the Jade Emperor, but it was Nisa who became the spark that ignited the storm. Once a mere boy defying fate, Nisa now stood at the helm of an army of exiled immortals, fallen celestial generals, and mortal warriors who had ascended beyond their limits. His cause was not merely vengeance, it was the promise of a new order, a heaven where the divine and the mortal could exist without tyranny. The battle lines were drawn in the clouds above the Jade Emperor's golden palace. The celestial army, led by the four heavenly kings, stood as an unbreakable wall, their divine weapons shimmering like stars against the darkness of the encroaching rebellion. At their center was Erlangchen, the mighty warrior god, his third eye glowing with divine insight. He was once Nisa's ally, but now, they stood as opposing forces in this great conflict. Nisa's forces, though outnumbered, were driven by a desperate passion that the loyalists lacked. With his fire-tipped spear in hand and his wind-fire wheels spinning beneath him, he led the charge. The heavens roared with the sound of war as blades clashed and spells tore through the sky, lighting up the celestial realm in a chaotic dance of destruction. Ancient weapons, sealed away for eons, were unearthed in the heat of battle. The rebels wielded treasures of forgotten eras, divine artifacts of boundless power. Taiyi Zhenren, Niza's former master, watched from afar, his heart heavy with sorrow. He had trained the boy to be a protector, not a destroyer, but fate had led them here nonetheless. The first great betrayal came at the hands of a god once trusted. The rebels had secured a crucial ally in General Li Jing, Niza's own father, who had promised to open the gates of the southern heavens for their entry. But when the moment came, he hesitated, torn between duty and blood. He wavered, and in that instant, the celestial army struck back with unrelenting force. Many of Niza's allies fell, their immortal essence dissipating into the void. The heavens burned with their sacrifice. Through the storm of battle, Niza faced his old rival, Ao Bing, the dragon prince reborn in divine form. Once enemies in the mortal world, their fates had intertwined in ways they could never have foreseen. Now, standing as warriors of opposing forces, they clashed in a duel that shook the very fabric of reality. Ao Bing fought with the might of his ancestors, wielding the fury of the seas, while Niza, forged by rebellion, burned with the fire of an unyielding will. Their battle was not one of hatred, but of necessity. Two souls caught in the grand, merciless wheel of fate. One by one, the celestial generals fell. The four heavenly kings, mighty as they were, could not hold against the storm of revolution. Erlangshan, his armor shattered and his divine eye dimmed, knelt in the ruins of the Jade Emperor's courtyard. He looked up at Niza, bloodied but unbowed, and with a weary smile, spoke, "Perhaps this was always meant to be." At last, Niza stood at the gates of the heavenly palace. The golden halls, once symbols of divine perfection, were now in ruins. The echoes of battle ringing through the corridors. The Jade Emperor, the ruler of heaven for millennia, awaited within, seated upon his celestial throne. His expression was unreadable. Was it fear, anger, or resignation? "You seek to bring change," the Jade Emperor spoke, his voice carrying the weight of eternity. "But the heavens do not bend so easily." Niza, weary but resolute, raised his spear. "Then we shall break them." As the final battle began, the heavens trembled, and all creation bore witness to the fall of the immortals. Chapter 9, The Final Trial. The war had raged for what felt like an eternity. Niza, their warrior forged in fire and defiance, had fought countless battles, each one more grueling than the last. His body bore the scars of 1,000 wounds, his mind the weight of endless struggles, but he was undeterred. Victory was within reach. And then, the sky itself split apart, a tremor shook the heavens, the celestial armies halted mid-battle, their weapons trembling in their hands. The air crackled with unnatural energy, a force beyond the comprehension of gods and mortals alike. It was an ancient presence, older than the heavens, older than the world itself. A being long forgotten in the annals of time had stirred, awakened by the carnage and chaos that had consumed the realms. From the rift in the sky, darkness poured forth, thick and suffocating like ink spilling across a canvas. A voice, deep and hollow, resonated through the heavens. It spoke no language known to the gods, no words that mortals could comprehend, yet its meaning was clear, unmaking. Oblivion. Niza gripped his spear tightly. He had fought demons and gods, defied the will of heaven itself, but never had he faced something so absolute. This was no mere enemy to be slain, no tyrant to overthrow. This was entropy made manifest, a force that sought to unravel existence. The gods stood frozen, paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the being before them. But Niza stepped forward. "I do not care what you are," he declared, his voice unwavering. "You threaten this world, and I will not allow it." The darkness swirled, amused. Then it struck. A tendril of nothingness lashed out, faster than the eye could follow. Niza barely dodged in time, the sheer force of its passing ripping apart the sky behind him. He retaliated, spinning his spear in a blur of fire and steel, slicing through the tendril. It recoiled, but where his blade had struck, there was no wound, just emptiness, as if the very fabric of reality had been consumed. The battle began. Niza danced between attacks, his agility the only thing keeping him from being erased. His fire-wheeled feet carried him across the heavens as he struck again and again, but no matter how many blows he landed, the darkness remained unscathed. It was like fighting a storm, an ocean, something vast and uncaring, something that did not recognize him as an opponent, only an obstacle to be erased. He summoned his celestial rings, hurling them with all his might. They burned with divine fire, cutting through the void like falling stars, but the darkness swallowed the flames whole, smothering them as if they had never existed. A shadow loomed above him. He barely had time to react before a colossal wave of nothingness crashed down. The heavens screamed as it passed, entire constellations flickering out of existence. Ziya raised his arms in defiance, bracing himself for the impact. Pain. It was unlike any pain he had ever known, not the searing agony of fire, nor the sharp sting of steel. It was the pain of unraveling, of being unmade. His very essence rebelled against it. His soul straining to hold itself together, Ziya let out a roar. His body igniting in golden flames, he forced himself forward, against the crushing tide of nothingness. Every step felt like an eternity, but he did not falter. He would not be raised. From the depths of his soul, he called upon every ounce of power he had ever wielded. The fire of his spirit burned brighter, hotter than ever before. It seared away the darkness around him, forcing the void to recoil. And then he understood, this being, this force, it was not alive. It had no will, no mind. It was an inevitability, a remnant from before creation. It could not be fought as one fought a foe of flesh and bone. It could not be slain, but it could be contained. Ziya turned his gaze toward the shattered sky, where the rift still yawned open. If he could force the darkness back through it, if he could seal it away, then perhaps, just perhaps, the world could be saved. The realization came with a price. He knew what he had to do, and he knew what it would cost. He looked down upon the world, upon the lands and people he had fought to protect. He thought of his mother's kindness, his father's stern love. He thought of his teachers, his friends, the mortals who told stories of him in whispers and prayers. He had been born into defiance, forged in rebellion. He had spent his existence proving that destiny could be challenged, and now, he would defy oblivion itself. With a final, mighty cry, he surged forward, all the power of his being coalescing into one final attack. His spear shone like the sun. His flames roared like an inferno. He became a blazing comet, a streak of defiance against the void. He struck the heart of the darkness. A shockwave rippled through the heavens. The void convulsed, recoiling, screaming without sound. Ziya did not waver. He pushed forward, forcing the entity back through the rift from which it had come. Reality trembled. With one last burst of will, he reached out, and sealed the rift shut. Silence. The heavens were still. The war was over. The gods watched in stunned awe. Ziya was gone, but his fire had not been extinguished. Far beyond the mortal and celestial planes, beyond time and space, something burned, a flicker of light in the void, a guardian of existence. Ziya had transcended, and he would never be forgotten. Chapter 10, Their Warrior's Legacy. The battle ended in fire and ash. The heavens were forever changed, the balance restored, but at a cost no one could have foreseen. Ziya, the fiery warrior, had transcended. His name would never be forgotten. His story would be told for generations to come, and somewhere, beyond the mortal and celestial planes, he watched over the world he had saved. The celestial battlefield, once alive with chaos, was now eerily silent. Smoke and embers drifted through the sky, remnants of the final clash that had reshaped the heavens. The gods stood in solemn contemplation, gazing at the space where Ziya had once stood, where his fire had blazed brighter than any star. The Jade Emperor, ruler of the celestial realm, lowered his gaze. Even in victory, there was loss. He turned to the assembled deities, his voice carrying both authority and sorrow. A warrior like Ziya is born once in an era. He defied the heavens, defied fate, and in the end, he saved us all. Among those gathered, Taiyi Zhenren, Niza's master, watched in silence. His student, once brash and reckless, had become something greater than even he had foreseen. There was pride in his eyes, but also grief. He had known from the moment he took Niza under his wing that the boy's destiny would not be an ordinary one, yet even he had not imagined this ending. Far below, in the mortal realm, the people felt a shift in the air. They did not know what had transpired in the heavens, but they felt the reverberations in their souls. A strange wind swept across the land, whispering the name of the fallen warrior. The seas that had once threatened to consume the shores were now calm, as if bowing in respect. Even the mountains seemed to stand taller, holding the weight of an untold legend. In Chentang Pass, where Niza's mortal life had begun, his mother stood at the edge of a quiet lake. Lady Yin had lost her son twice, once to the wrath of fate, and now to the duty of a guardian beyond existence. She did not weep, she only looked at the water, her heart heavy, yet filled with an indescribable peace. "My son," she whispered, "I always knew you were meant for something greater. You were never meant to stay in one place, but I will always miss you." A single lotus bloomed upon the water, its petals catching the last light of the setting sun. Perhaps, in some way, it was his answer. In the celestial courts, debates arose. Would Niza be honored as a deity? Would temples be built in his name? Some argued that he had transcended even divinity itself, becoming something beyond their comprehension. Taiyi Zhenren stood before them and spoke at last. Niza was never one for titles or temples. He was never one to seek reverence. If you wish to honor him, let it not be with statues, but with stories. Let his name be carried in the hearts of those who seek courage, those who defy tyranny, those who fight for the sake of others. And so, the decree was made. Niza's name would be passed down through history, not as a god to be worshipped, but as a legend to be remembered. Yet Niza was not truly gone. In the void beyond time and space, where the remnants of creation's first breath still lingered, a fire burned. It was small at first, a flickering ember in the vast emptiness, but it did not waver. It grew, pulsing with life, with purpose. Niza had transcended the realms of gods and men, but he had not abandoned them. He was not bound to any plane, yet he was present in all, a guardian unseen, a whisper in the wind when a hero needed courage, a warmth in the heart of those who faced impossible odds, and in the quiet moments, when the stars aligned just so, when the night was still and the world seemed at peace, one could almost hear the faint echo of laughter, a wild, fearless sound, filled with the spirit of a warrior who had defied even fate itself. Niza's legacy would never fade, for as long as there were those who fought for justice, for as long as there were those who stood against tyranny, for as long as courage burned in the hearts of mortals and gods alike, his fire would never be extinguished. And somewhere, beyond the reach of heaven and earth, he watched, waiting for the moment he was needed once more. A traveler walked through a distant land, where the wind carried the scent of the sea and the sky stretched endlessly above. He stopped at a village where a group of children gathered around an elder, their eyes wide with wonder. "Tell us a story," one child begged. The elder smiled and began to speak. "There once was a warrior, born from fire, who defied the heavens and fate itself." As the story unfolded, the wind stirred, rustling the trees as if carrying the tale across the land. Somewhere, in the vastness of existence, a presence lingered, a watchful gaze, a silent promise. Niza was not gone, he was here, in the courage of those who stood against darkness, in the laughter of those who refused to be bound by fear, in the dreams of those who dared to shape their own destinies. And whenever the world needed him, he would return, not as a god, not as a king, but as the fire that could never be extinguished. The legend lives on. And so, Niza's journey comes to an end, but his spirit lives on, a warrior of defiance, a protector of justice, and a symbol of unyielding will. Niza's story reminds us that fate is not written in stone. From his rebellious beginnings to his greatest battles, he carved his own path, standing tall against gods, demons, and destiny itself. Though this tale has reached its final page, the legend of Ziya will continue to inspire those who dare to challenge the impossible. Thank you for joining me on this adventure. This may be the end of this story, but perhaps, like Ziya, new journeys await. Until then, may we all face our challenges with the same fire in our hearts. The legend never truly ends.